Listeners, welcome to Girl Flip. 45 minutes of real talk about creating space, building community, and switching the flip for women everywhere. Because anything boys can do, girls can do better. I'm Erica Annenberg, your host, and we're on a mission to enforce and promote women history makers and trailblazers in all kinds of professions. Girl Flip features women in male-dominated industries and switches the flip by bringing the feminine touch anywhere and everywhere. This is Girl Flip, where women get it done. I'm so pumped for the opportunity to shine a light on women who have pioneered the way for generations to come. So I'm a 70s baby, and times were way different back then. I remember how weird it was for me to learn that my mom was granted the rights so she could get a credit card in her name without my dad's help. There were so many unjust inequalities between genders, and there still are today, which is why when a guest comes on our show who has spent so much time and energy making changes for women, like our next guest, it literally rocks me to my core. It moves me so much when I think of all the stereotypes she has shattered. I'm Erica Annenberg, and this is Girl Flip. So please give me a huge round of applause for our next guest, the one and only Christie Hefner. So Christie Hefner is a businesswoman and activist. Hefner was chairman and CEO of Playboy Enterprises from 1988 to 2009 and is the daughter of Playboy founder Hugh Hefner. She is currently the executive chairman of Canyon Ranch Enterprises, a company focused on health and wellness. Christie is currently an environmental activist, healthcare revolutionary, and women's rights advocate. Thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure.
So, I gotta ask you, like, you obviously are a accomplished entrepreneur. Did you always know, like, that's the way that you were, like, even from a young girl?
I actually wasn't particularly interested in business when I was growing up. Even in college, I was more drawn to journalism and law and politics than business. And in fact, worked as a journalist for a year after graduating, and then was planning to apply to graduate school for a degree in law and public policy. And frankly, my ambitions at that point were to wind up either on the Supreme Court or in the Senate. So business was not on my radar, and it really evolved out of the invitation my father extended to just learn a little bit about the company. And I moved back to Chicago, still with the intention of only being there for a short period of time. But as happens, life goes its own way. And of course, I wound up building a career there.
That's incredible. And so you grew into being an entrepreneur? I mean, do you feel like it's in your blood now?
I am so, frankly, respectful of entrepreneurs that I would not call myself an entrepreneur. I think I'm an innovative strategist. I think the approach we took when I was running Playboy Enterprises to really redefine ourselves, not as a publishing company, but as a multimedia brand-driven company. I think the work I did with Canyon Ranch around extending their content and their brand, and the portfolio of companies I work with now, a number of which have been started by founding entrepreneurs, allows me to add value in terms of how to scale a company, how to build a culture, how to think about the change that, whether it's technology or demographics is creating. But I actually don't think of myself as an entrepreneur. I think my dad clearly was an entrepreneur. I helped start a wonderful women's organization called the Committee of 200, which is made up of half entrepreneurs and half corporate women. And part of why I love that organization is I just think the kind of cross pollination between entrepreneurs and women more like myself who've built and been in businesses that they didn't start is actually a really exciting way to get different perspectives.
I absolutely love that, because as an entrepreneur, like, I would be nothing without, women like you, or leaders. I mean, you guys are really leaders, because you have these entrepreneurs that are just sort of right, kind of all over the place, and you have to lead them in, and if it were up to me, within my business, I probably would lose focus very quickly if I didn't have, corporate women coming in and reining me in.
Well, I mean, I think in reality, Erica, that all successful leaders, whether they feel they're more entrepreneurial or not, are successful if they know how to build a team, if they know how to put together a group of people that the sum is greater than, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, that complements each other and is diverse in its experiences and backgrounds and therefore perspectives. So regardless of whether you feel in your heart that you're more the ideas person and the entrepreneur, or you think you're more the executional operating person, the reality is no one style by itself is going to optimize success.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. And, as so, my latest company is Girl Flip Construction, and now I'm a general contractor. So it's literally like I'm picking subcontractors who are like your team. In other businesses that I've had have been, marketing, or, operations. As a contractor, I'm literally doing the same kind of thing. And you can't, if you don't pick the right people, you can't build. Just like you're building a company, you can't build a house. So it's incredible.
Yeah, because you'll only be as strong as your weakest team member.
Absolutely, and it's interesting how, in theory, in a company, and with building a house, the foundation, and if you're not really, thinking about the framing and the initial things that go into building a house, the end product, is going to fail. So, I love that analogy, and that's why I love building. I'd love to know more. So you obviously always had a great relationship with your father, for him to say, hey, come in and learn the business.
Well, my parents separated and divorced when I was very young. So the reality is I didn't grow up with my father. I grew up with my mother for a number of years, and then she remarried, and my brother and I had a stepfather, and we saw our father, but really just a few times a year, for Christmas, for birthdays, et cetera, et cetera. So I only got close again to my dad when I was in college, and he had bought his home in Los Angeles, which made it possible on vacations to actually go out and stay for a few days and just spend literally more time together. But even when he extended the invitation about moving back to Chicago from Boston and learning more about the company, I don't think that he had in mind that I would stay and run the company someday. I certainly didn't have that in mind. I think he saw it as a chance to spend some time together. And I saw it as kind of like a junior year abroad, would just be different and interesting. And then I would go on with my life.
And so back then, I know, like, there was obviously, as an activist, there was a lot of, women's rights issues. How did that play out, going to work for, a magazine that was basically male dominated?
Well, it was interesting. Actually, there were more women editors at Playboy magazine than there were at Time or Newsweek. It was actually a pretty inclusive culture even before I took it to the next level. But maybe more or as significant as that is that the magazine was really founded on a set of principles and almost a philosophy, and that included a high degree of commitment to sort of personal freedom and social justice. And so at the time that I first joined, kind of the prevailing socio-political attitudes, if you will, were around the sexual revolution, around civil rights, around the environmental movement. And the women's movement was really very focused on sexual freedom. The pill had just become available, around abortion rights, which here we are sitting today, relitigating that. But at the time, we were moving towards, safe and legal abortion. And there was a kind of interconnectivity between sexual freedom and women's freedom. Only after that period was there a kind of backlash that started as a backlash against violence in the media and in sexual content. But then there was a part of that just became an anti-sexual imagery, anti the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue, anti-Playboy, anti the Miss America beauty pageant. And that was an interesting time because that created an environment for a conversation around, well, what does it mean to be a feminist? And how do you allow young women to have the benefits of both the sexual revolution and the women's movement? And why is it that the countries that repress women's rights are also the countries that repress sexual expression? Because I think the two are linked. And then kind of it changed through the next generation that very much embraced both kind of personal sexual freedom with women's empowerment, which is where I think we've settled in, which I think is actually a very good place.
Absolutely. I love listening to this story and thinking about the history. And also, I love knowing that your father was someone who wanted women around in the corporate structure and was, willing, and not just willing, but had those, was brought up in a way where he believed women brought value, in the business place.
He had a terrific mother. I was very close to his mother, my grandmother, who lived to be 101, which is pretty amazing for someone born in 1896.
Absolutely.
And had been a chemist and I think was very influential on my dad and his values and attitudes. And so while there's no question that my dad had a lot of girlfriends in his life, he also, to your point, very much did appreciate and respect strong women. It was interesting that actually it was the Playboy Foundation that provided the seed grant to the Women's Rights Project of the ACLU that Ruth Bader Ginsburg started. And it was just born of this very strong view that, a better society is a society that provides opportunities for all, whether it's women or people of color or people who are gay or lesbian. And back in the kind of 50s and 60s and early 70s, those were wildly controversial attitudes, to your point about your mom needing, permission from her husband to get a credit card in the 70s.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people don't know that about your dad. Your grandmother was a chemist. That's pretty spectacular. Back then they weren't even, going to college, nothing,
and indeed she grew up on a farm and she had a number of siblings, and her father thought it was a waste of time for girls to go to college. So she worked after high school as a teacher, drove a buggy back and forth to school to make enough money to apply to the University of Wesleyan in Nebraska to put herself through college. So yeah, she was an amazing person. I think she's the person, one of the stories I love about my dad was before he started Playboy, and my mom was pregnant with me, and he was working in HR, human resources, for a Chicago-based company, and he'd just gotten this small promotion. So now part of his job was to interview candidates for, who are applying to come into the company. And his boss said to him, I can, let me help you be more efficient at this job. If you have a candidate who has either a Jewish sounding or foreign sounding last name, you don't need to spend very much time with that person because we're not interested in those kinds of people. And my dad quit. So he didn't have another job. I was on the way. but he just couldn't imagine staying in a company that had those attitudes. And that's really his mom.
I can see that. And that is what like shapes the core of what Playboy is, you know? And most people don't hear that or know that. They just see, you know, how classy it is, how many women are employed, but they don't really know the backstory. So thank you so much for sharing that. It's actually really fascinating. Um, I'm also really interested to learn about your involvement with Canyon Ranch. Like, how do you go from Playboy to health and wellness?
Yes, and I should say that I'm not involved with them anymore. When the founders sold their interest, I also stopped working with them. And so while I have a portfolio of companies I work with now, Canyon Ranch isn't one of them. But in answer to your question, I had always served on another for-profit board during my tenure as CEO. And at one point in time, that was the Canyon Ranch board. So that's how I actually first worked with them. And I got to know the founders when we were developing our what's sometimes called location-based entertainment strategies at Playboy, which ultimately led to our partnership with the Palms in Las Vegas and project in London and other places. But during that time, I was interested in potential co-branding partners. And in one category, which was a really wonderful spa, in doing my research, pretty much everybody I asked said that head and shoulders above everyone else in the space is Canyon Ranch. They were really the first people to think progressively about kind of healthy living and health and wellness and create destination resorts around wellness. So I reached out to the founders in order to get to know them with the thought that we might actually partner at some point. Now, we never did, but at a different point, a few years after that initial visit, they invited me on their board. Then they reconfigured their board in a different direction and I left the board. But when I left running Playboy Enterprises, they contacted me about coming back and working with them. And I had always felt that beyond the destination resorts, the brand itself and their content, which were amazing recipes and programs for healthy weight loss and brain health and healthy sleep, could be extended through both multimedia and partnerships to reach more people and to keep the people who'd been to the property connected to them. So that's what I did with them for about 3 or 4 years. And it was fascinating and in one odd way, a little bit similar to Playboy in that both companies and both brands had really kind of created new lifestyle positions that hadn't really existed before. And I remain a very big fan of theirs. And I've sort of continued a little bit in the health and wellness space. I'm chairman of a company called Hatch Beauty Brands, and we incubate beauty and wellness brands for large retailers. And then I'm on the board of a SPAC that went public in August called Healthwell, and our CEO, both the founder of Hatch Beauty and the CEO of Healthwell happen to both be women. And Healthwell is looking for a tech-forward healthcare company to take public. So I get to still kind of see what's happening in that all-important health and wellness space.
Yeah, I love that. And I also love that you're still working with women, you know, entrepreneurs and corporate women. What advice do you have for a woman today who wants to start their own business?
Well, I'd go back to something, Erica, that we were talking about earlier, which is, you know, sort of building your team. So I know sometimes women get the advice that they should find a mentor. And I don't have anything negative to say about that if someone is fortunate enough to find someone who they think would be a good mentor. But I generally advise not assuming you need that. It always feels a little bit like kind of a business version of Prince Charming, like you have to find the one. So I, first of all, advise building your network. So staying out there and being connected to a lot of women and men who are smart and interesting from different industries, different fields, both entrepreneurs and corporate, so that you have both a pool when you go to build your board to go to, but also just kind of a kitchen cabinet. Secondly, I definitely am an advocate for learning to be a good negotiator and being able to feel confident in your ability to negotiate, because so much of not just business, but life is around effective negotiating and how you understand what the other person's needs and wants are and how you articulate what your needs and wants are. And as has been said, you don't really get in life what you deserve. You get in life what you negotiate for. So I do think that that's important. And then I guess the last thing I would say is the rate of change, certainly just even in the form of technology, which really is impacting all kinds of businesses. I'm sure it's impacting your construction business, is so significant that it's really important to kind of develop the muscles that are what allow you to be intellectually agile and to not ever get into a mindset of, hey, we've gotten successful. Hey, I've gotten successful. I know how to do this. I just need to keep doing it the same way. Because the companies and the people that fall into that trap are the ones that become, Blockbuster instead of Netflix, It's just really important to keep challenging yourself and your team to say, hey, how could we be doing things differently? Maybe the competitive set has changed. Maybe there's a different way to define what business we're in. Starbucks is going through that right now. For a lot of their years, they were the third place, right? The whole idea of Starbucks was there was your work, there was home, and then there was this European coffee shop inspired place. It's why they provided free Wi-Fi. And now, the majority of their coffee is being sold with people who've ordered it ahead of time and are just picking it up or driving through. So they're going to have to rethink kind of what does that mean in terms of what kind of stores do they buy? How do they build their teams and culture? How do they market? And that's just one example.
I feel like you're talking to me. Like I'd like you to have a seat on my board one day. I mean, you sound like a business advisor, and it could be priceless. One thing that I would add to that is about obviously from an entrepreneurial standpoint, never taking no for an answer. That's the one thing that I've just done naturally, and then also being able to pivot, right? Like constant pivot.
Perfect.
So I love that. Like what
I sometimes say I have an urgent sense of patience, right? So you need a sense of urgency to get things done, but sometimes you have to play the long game. So you have to be a little patient.
Oh yeah, I don't. Patient is like I don't even know what that means. I want everything done yesterday, and no one can do it as fast as me. And that's one of the things, like being able to delegate, because no one can do anything as fast as me. That has can become an issue.
Well, yeah, and the way you manage and the team you have and the way the organization chart looks is going to be different in 3 years than it is today. And so you just have to accept that and be prepared to be, in effect, a lifelong learner, because that's really what business requires. But also that's the great gift of the way our economy, our society, our culture has evolved. So we were talking about my grandmother earlier. So her husband, who was a CPA, spent 50 years at one firm, and retired and had the proverbial retirement dinner and gold watch. Now he came out of retirement to help his son, my dad, in the early days of Playboy. But that idea of you would have one career at one place for your life was pretty much the norm. It was basically first you went to school, then you worked, and then you retired. And now we are all having so many different chapters in our lives. And part of that is that you want to keep learning, not just say, oh, I already went to school, Part of it is that the things that people used to be willing to defer to retirement, whether that was family time or learning new things or interesting sports or giving back, people don't want to wait till quote unquote retirement to do those things. But part of it is I just don't think people are retiring anymore. They just want to stay engaged and active, but it may take different forms as in different chapters in their lives.
Right. That leads me to my next question, right? What are you still learning? What's next for Christie Hefner?
Well, all right, now I have 10 companies that I work with, and to use the word coach,
Wow.
I'm kind of a strategic advisor coach to 2 CEOs. And then I have 8 companies that I'm on the board of or the advisory board of. And they're at various stages of growth. And so I can manage that. But when I am asked to get involved with a company, I have 4 simple questions that I ask myself. One is, would I want to have a long dinner with these people? Because honestly, if I don't really like and want to spend time with the people, I'm not interested. It's one of the luxuries that I have at this point in my career, in that when you're running a big organization, you just have to get along with everybody, not just your own employees, of course, but your shareholders, the press, your business partners, your vendors, etc. So would I want to have a long dinner? 2, do I find the business genuinely interesting? So for example, one of the CEOs I work with, New Light Technologies, they've patented a way to extract methane from the atmosphere and convert it into a material that has all the durability of plastic, but it's ocean biodegradable, which is like super cool and important.
Wow.
So, I want to be genuinely engaged with the business. Third, of course, I ask myself, can I help them? And then my last question is, will I learn something new? So I push myself to be in situations where it's not all familiar, because that is, for me, a critical way to maintain this intellectual agility that we were talking about earlier.
Wow, that makes sense. And that brings me to our sponsor, which is actually a side hustle of mine, and I think you will appreciate. I have a company called Backgammon Baby. And
I love backgammon.
Yes. And
I don't play very much anymore, but I do love it.
I know a lot about Hugh Hefner and backgammon and pips and
yes, I love pips.
Back in the day, backgammon players. So there's backgammon tournament players and there's just mainstream backgammon family players. And when I first started designing backgammon sets, I was talking to the tournament players who have been playing since pips, and they talk about pips like it was the best time in their life. And I'll explain to our viewers, pips was a backgammon club back in the 70s in Beverly Hills, the hottest club owned by Hugh Hefner, and where people came. Then you'd see Lucille Ball doing tournaments, and
they had a. You were exactly right in your description. And then there was a very good restaurant, and then a disco dance space too. But it was a very cool club, and I don't know, maybe backgammon will make a resurgence.
Well, if it does, we have Backgammon Baby here. It's actually the world's first fashion-forward backgammon sets, and I can't wait to send you one.
Very cool.
I'll show you the inside. It's like red, and we have snake skin.
That's beautiful.
I've got this one's an ice cream cone one, so I want to send you a couple of them.
Thank you. I love that.
I'm thinking, maybe your 5th question is, can you play a good backgammon game with your CEO of your next company? And
I did once play. I learned at one point, a banker we were working with one of my companies when we were raising outside capital from Persia, and actually, which is a part of the world where backgammon has a long and storied history, although there's some changes in the way they play the game from the way Americans play the game. But somehow the subject of it, backgammon, came up, and I said, that I had played for a while, although I didn't really play much anymore. And so one time when we were in New York meeting with potential investors, he just happened to bring his backgammon board, just happened to have it when we were meeting for a drink to download on the day's meetings. And I said, okay, all right, open the board and we'll play. And I said, but we have to play for money because backgammon, like poker, is a game of skill, but it's also a game of chance. And your ability to bet is an integral element of the game. So like in poker, if there was no money involved, you would never fold. And so then you would lose that whole strategy element of the game. And the same in backgammon with the doubling die, as you know very well.
Absolutely.
So anyway, long story short, I won a reasonable amount of money. And I said to our CEO the next day, I said, I think I'm going to play our banker for our fees, which of course I didn't do, but.
That's so funny. I actually play with my wife for massages. And
Oh,
so,
that's good because
yeah.
that's a win-win.
Yeah. It is a win-win. That's so that I love hearing stories, from history, and this is a true history. Do you have any good stories like back at the Playboy Mansion, or with celebrities in the 70s and 80s?
Well, because I was an English major and I worked for the Boston Phoenix and I'm an avid reader, my mother was an English teacher. Honestly, the people I was most excited about meeting when I was at the company tended to be the writers, not the movie people. It just was kind of who I am. So, meeting Joyce Carol Oates or Margaret Atwood or David Halberstam or Robert Caro, that was more exciting for me. But my dad had a circle of friends, many of whom were not famous because he was an extremely loyal person. And so he had the same friends he had before he became famous. But there were some people who were celebrities who were good friends of my dad, who were really good people, Warren Beatty. And I think they kind of bonded around politics, to be perfectly honest, because they were both really involved in progressive politics in the 70s and beyond. And James Caan, who actually is still around and about, as both of them are, which is kind of cool. In fact, I think I saw James Caan in conjunction with the anniversary of the original Godfather movie that just got a lot of press.
Awesome. I do want to ask you, as a Hefner, what legacy do you want to leave?
I'm not good at answering legacy questions. I would like to, leave the world a little better place than I found it. We haven't talked about it, but I work with a number of nonprofits. I work with a accelerator for women tech entrepreneurs called Springboard. That's a nonprofit. I work with a nonprofit called Women Corporate Directors that works to get more women on boards. I'm on the board of a large public policy think tank in Washington, D.C., the Center for American Progress Action. I'm on the board of a large hospital system. And then I work to elect candidates that I think will help move the country forward in a progressive direction that will create a fairer society for everybody. And so I try and give back in that sense. And I try and be a really good friend. I'm not married anymore, but I take a trip every summer with the 5 women who were bridesmaids in my wedding. When I got divorced, I said the marriage didn't last, but bridesmaids are forever.
Oh, I love that.
I hugely value my girlfriends, and I try and be a good friend. So, I think like all of us, you're trying to be your best self in every moment.
I love that. So you're not involved with the magazine at all anymore?
I am not. We do have a family foundation that my dad set up, and we do the HMH First Amendment Awards through that. And that's kind of a labor of love for me because I actually was involved in starting those when the magazine turned 25 back in 1979. So I was like a kid. So I'm involved in that way with the legacy.
Amazing. Is there any other business opportunities or on the horizon that you think that you might want to get involved in?
Well, I try and stay open. That's kind of the fun of being able to put a portfolio together. I can continue to meet people and hear about people who are in transition or companies that are in transition. So I assume that if we were having another conversation in a year and a half, that there probably would be some things that I was doing then that I'm not doing now. And I look forward to that.
Yeah, maybe like construction.
Well, I haven't been involved in construction before. I am on the board of the company that's the largest John Deere dealer in the US. And so we have construction equipment as well as ag equipment. So I know just enough to be dangerous about that.
I love that. Well, maybe they'll want to carry some girl flip tool belts. We make tool belts too.
I like that.
Fashion forward ones. I want to send you those as well. So we've got 5 minutes left. Is there anything else that you want to talk about? What about this Philo, the cannabis compliance marketing company?
Yeah, that's one of the more recent boards I joined. It's a Chicago-based company, and their founder saw an opportunity to identify highly regulated industries that are kind of representative of the new economy and provide to those industries real-time information about changes in regulations, as well as gather information about their customers and license that, like Nielsen licenses its data to all kinds of businesses who are always looking for new customers. And to your point, Erica, they started in the cannabis space. So we sell information about, a town has changed the hours for their dispensaries, or a state has just legalized adult use, or there's a change in the packaging requirements. So we gather all of that in real time and license that to companies in the cannabis business. But then the bigger business is we have agreements to gather consumer data at point of sale and consumer insights, and then the literally Uber or Target or UBS or Diageo will license that consumer data. So we're continuing to build that business. We've made some acquisitions, and then we're going to move into other new economy, highly regulated industries like crypto and sports betting. So it's a diverse team. The founder is a guy, but it's an unusual tech forward company in that it's not just a bunch of bros. It's a very diverse team, and the board's a diverse board, and that's been fun.
That's great, because it's all about making things easier, right? Like, how much
Yes.
easier would it be to just, if you're starting a company, whatever it is, it sounds like it's not just cannabis, and it's all companies that need information,
Yes.
regulations or whatever, that you have this one-stop shop that you can just basically call, and they can give you all the information you need to make your business
it's a great way to put it, because in many ways I think it's really helpful when you're thinking about a business to think about what is it solving. So I think too often people think, well, I've created this really neat product or service, and so everybody should want it, and I'm going to just go out and tell you why you should want it. And really what you want to be offering are solutions. So what are the needs or wants that other people have that your product or service can address? And I think Philo's super smart about that.
Yeah, and also one thing too that people forget, not just about the product and what are you solving, but how are you helping people? Because
and that's what a solution is. It's helping people. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's a win-win-win, right? You win, I win, and everyone else wins, and that's when the magic happens, because
absolutely,
because it's not just about yourself anymore.
No, it's very true. One of the things I felt I learned relatively early in my career running Playboy, because we were doing a lot of international business expansion, is how much more relationship focused a lot of people and companies outside the US were, whereas we were more transactional here. And I actually came to believe that more relationship focused approach was just much smarter. You wound up with more long-term beneficial partnerships, and also with partnerships that when the unexpected happened, as inevitably it does, whether that's a unforeseen opportunity or an unforeseen problem, if you've actually built a relationship as opposed to just done a deal, you're much more likely to go through that unforeseen opportunity or problem and come out the other side.
I mean, those are kind of great last words, but do you have any other last words since we're wrapping up right now?
I don't think so, but I love your living the experience of constantly reinventing yourself and challenging yourself to take your skills and experiences and expertise into other industries. And I would just encourage all of your listeners to widen the aperture, as the expression goes, and just to not feel limited by what they've done before.
I literally have chills, Christie. Like, you are brilliant. You're not only like so graceful and classy, but you're also brilliant. Like, I wish I had a big enough company that you would want to like do the 4 things that you talked about. And maybe we could do just one of them, like dinner. So
I think that's a definite possibility.
oh, yeah. I'm excited. Thank you so much, Christie. Like, you are just brilliant. I'm so appreciative and grateful for your time. Today, we interviewed Christie Hefner, and she talked about all her incredible accomplishments that she has made as a businesswoman. I'm so excited to share her story with our listeners, and I look forward to many more interviews with women who help level the playing field for our future generations. How can we find you, Christie? What social media? Do you have any?
Yeah, no, you can't find me. I am actually one of those people that has opted out of social media. I have a wide and deep network, and people find me without mine needing to be on social media.
Okay, so. Even better. We have an exclusive on Girl Flip only, Christie Hefner. Oh my God, that was an incredible show with Christie Hefner. I'm speechless. I'm blown away. It was amazing. And how perfect that our sponsor is Backgammon Baby. They make the world's first fashionable backgammon sets. And Hugh Hefner, Christie's dad, was a huge backgammon player, so it's actually perfect. You can find our backgammon sets at backgammonbaby.com. We're going to give you a code today, Hefner20 for 20% off. Thank you so much for listening. That was awesome. We are Girl Flip, where women get it done.